When people ask me where I'm from, I usually say I'm from a lot of places. Like, based on my appearance, I usually make white people uncomfortable, but they're not like quite sure why. So let me try to explain. My mother was a white American overbearing Jew who grew up in Newton, Massachusetts. And my father was an Israeli immigrant who came to the United States in the early 60s, just out of the army, and became one of the first people in New York City to sell falafel. So to anyone here who's ever enjoyed a tasty falafel sandwich in America, on behalf of my father, you're welcome. And I know, like, okay, but like he looks brown, but I didn't think he was that kind of brown. Well, that's because I'm Mexican. And I'm also part native, so it's like all real confusing. You know, like you don't understand what's happening. What is he? I'm a college admissions director's wet dream is what I am. And I know you guys are asking, like, well, like, how did this crazy confluence of events like conspire to bring forth this beautiful specimen of a man you see standing here before you today? So I'm gonna try to explain it a little bit. I'm adopted and I was born in Mexico City. And growing up in the suburbs of Massachusetts with my mom, I thought I was a pretty obnoxious child. And I thought I had the single best retort when I got in trouble ever, which was, haha, I'm adopted, you picked me, you can't complain. And for the most part, it worked. Until one day when I was like 11 or 12 and particularly obnoxious, my mom sat me down and I threw the thing back in her face and said, and she sat me down and said, you know what, you're right. And I'm gonna tell you how I picked you. So I was born into a Catholic orphanage in Mexico City in 1977. And my adopted mother had come from New York City to adopt me and got me when I was about 5 days old. And we stayed with her family, and then now my family, in Mexico City for about 3 or 4 weeks until my mom thought I was ready to travel and we were gonna go back to Queens and start our life. And so we get to the airport and we get to the gate and we get, they're ready to board, and me and my mom go up to the gangplank and the lady says, tickets, please. My mom hands over the tickets and they say, oh no, I'm sorry, we can't let you on the plane. You see, there's a law in Mexico at the time that makes sense that says, a child cannot travel without written permission from the birth mother until they're 1 year old. Which makes sense because you don't want a bunch of babies just going wherever they choose. So, my mom understood it. But she said, no, but you didn't understand, there's a misunderstanding. I've adopted him. I have these adoption papers. So they supersede that rule because he's my son. I'm his mother. And they said, no, I'm sorry, that doesn't fly, we need that paper. And she said, no. He's my son, I'm his mother. This is like I'm his birth mother. These papers say that. So they say no, they argue till they're blue in the face, and we don't get on the plane. We don't know what to do, so my mom comes back to the family in Mexico City where she's staying. The next day, she calls the orphanage, explains the situation, says, we just need this paper signed by his birth mother. They say, no, I'm sorry, it's a closed adoption. There's no contact between the birth parents and the adoptive parents once the adoption is finalized. My mom says, no, you don't understand. Like, we don't need to see her. I just need this form signed so we can leave. And then they say, no. She argues with them until she's blue in the face. So, not knowing what else to do, she hires a private detective to find a Mexican woman in the city of Mexico City in the 1970s. As you can imagine, that's not the easiest task. After another 2 months, having exhausted every possibility, they're unable to locate her. My mom is faced with the decision of spending a year in Mexico or taking drastic measures. She chose drastic measures. My mom and the private detective went down to the streets of Mexico, found a homeless woman, brought her in, cleaned her up, forged documents saying that she was my birth mother, brought her in to a Mexican court, and had her sign the document saying that we could go home. That's crazy. Now, as a 12-year-old boy sitting in my kitchen table, I'm like, that's crazy. Wait, does that make me illegal? It makes me American. But thinking back on that story now, however many years later, the part that I always remember that replays in my mind is when my mother is at the gate with me, trying to get on that plane, and she's saying, no, he's my son. I'm his mother, over and over again. Because in her mind, I've always been her son. And when I think about it, I don't know my other parents. She's always been my mother. So that's how I know that's where I'm from. Thank you.